activate in a space of forgiveness, but we're not even truthfully honest enough with ourselves to understand why we are where we are. You start to grow, you're digging out everything, but you want to have a strong foundation. So the truth is going to be the catalyst that helps you get to the place that you need to get to. And sometimes we often lie to ourselves about why we are in what we're in, how we got here. One of the easiest mechanisms that people use, or blaming mechanism, is blaming someone else. It's your fault. You did this. Because of you, that's why I'm here. But we forget to look at the part that we play in it. And that's been a great part of my healing journey in life and friendships and relationships and even in business. There are a lot of things that will hinder the growth process of yourself and others in your environment if you don't realize your truth.
Hey guys, hey, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon. Whatever time of day it is that you are tuning into this podcast, I am Kiana F. Brown, your forgiveness expert. To some of you, I am your pet groomer. To others, I am the forgiveness expert. And to some, I'm simply Coach Key. So I just wanted to come and celebrate with you all on this beautiful Forgiveness Friday, right? So the first thing that I want you all to do is just make sure that you're sharing this message so that there are others who need to possibly tap into what we're doing over here in the healing zone in their lives so that they can rock out and be the superstars that God has designed for them to be. Now, the second thing that I need you to do, I need you to let me know where you're tuning in from. Who are you? What are you about? And you always got to let us know that you're ready to heal, so you can type in the chat, hashtag I'm ready to heal. And for all of my replay listeners, thank you for tuning in. But go ahead and let us know that you're catching this on the replay, because I want to acknowledge you too. So with all of you all, I always go back and join the conversation with you all in the chat. And that's what I want to do. I want to build relationships with you, because that's one thing, that's what we're talking about today. But also I want to build those relationships with you so that you can feel comfortable, so that you can come into the healing zone and you can relax yourself. You can let your hair down and you can go in and discuss different things that you would never discuss in another place or another platform. And so guys, what today is, that it's Forgiveness Friday, and we like to celebrate. And don't let me forget about the Audible listeners. This podcast is streaming on. Excited for those of you who are just listening in and tuning in with us today. But it's time to celebrate. Because today is Forgiveness Friday.
You're like a circle that floats around me, keeping me safe and sound.
Hey, yes, forgiveness is like a circle around me, keeping me safe and sound. So thank you for celebrating with me on my National Friday, Forgiveness Friday. Every single Friday, I like to remember all of the things that the Lord has done for me as it relates to the power of forgiveness. And I'm glad that you are tuning and sharing that with me. So if some of you have been tuning in, this is part 3. Yes, that's part 3. That means we've been doing this for 3 weeks. We've been talking about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And for some of you who are probably just tuning in, you're like, what in the world does that have to do with healing? So let me give you a quick recap. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story, but Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was all about Dr. Jekyll, who decided that he wanted to make another entity, and he figured out a formula to make that other entity with inside of his own self. And so as a result of that, he made something that he thought was brilliant and magnificent, being a scientist, a doctor, and all of those things. He said, hey, I've done something, I've broken the mold. But what he wasn't quite ready for is for that other personality to come out. He wasn't ready for what that other personality was going to display to the world. And so Mr. Hyde started to come out. And as he did, Mr. Hyde, he did some things that were not so pleasing to Dr. Jekyll. And so Dr. Jekyll was really sick and tired of waking up or coming back to his consciousness, realizing all of the things that Mr. Hyde had done. So ultimately, he was ready to be done with it all. So he knew enough science to be able to create this different personality within himself, but he didn't really know how to get rid of it. So he decided that he was just going to end it all for the both of them, meaning that he was going to take himself to his own demise so that Mr. Hyde could no longer be a threat to the outside world. Now, today we're talking about toxic relationships and how does this all correlate with what we're talking about with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So last week we had a conversation about triggers. The week before that, we kind of, dived into what the actual topic was going to be about and some of the areas that we were going to hit on. And so as we looked at last week, some of the triggers that allow for us to see when our Mr. Hyde was coming out. And I've told you all guys before that I have dealt with anger issues, and that's my Mr. Hyde. When certain situations or circumstances happen, I have had to learn how to control Mr. Hyde from coming out. And so in order to do that, I had to learn what my triggers were. But what if these triggers are happening inside of your relationships? So I made this little clip that I want you all to look at. This is from a very, very prestigious doctor who's talking about toxic relationships. Go ahead and check this out for me.
All right, guys, before we get started today, we want to talk about if the relationships we in are toxic due to Mr. Hyde coming out. Well, let's listen to what Dr. Lillian Glass says. She's defined toxic people as any relationship between whomever that don't support each other, where there's conflict, one is seeking to undermine the other one's, and competition, where there's disrespect and a lack of cohesiveness. Some possible signs of toxic relationships are feeling manipulated, being abused, and lied to. So if you're in this, you're in a toxic relationship. Now let's get started.
Hey guys, so I hope that you have taken a little bit of notes from that. I know that I was going really, really fast, but I'm trying to jam pack everything into this podcast because, we don't have that much time. And so Dr. Glass was really profound when she made the statement, some things that we really need to look at to recognize if we're in a toxic relationship. So Dr. Glass said a toxic relationship is one where you have no support, meaning that the friend, the spouse, or whomever, co-worker, however you want to develop the relationship, because there are a plethora of ways that you can be in a relationship. But she said that that's when you're not getting support in that relationship. When someone is undermining another person, or when there is abuse. And there were some other key points that she put in there. But I wanted us to look at the definition of both of these words, toxic and relationship. So let's look at toxic first. The first thing that I found in the dictionary was that toxic means poisonous. And when I think about that in relation to relationships, that makes me think about how when people behave in the way that Dr. Glass said, that they are now being a poison to the person or people that they're in relationships with. Now, the second definition is very harmful or unpleasant in persuasive or insidious ways. And right below that, you guys, it says a toxic relationship. So the second portion of this just really breaks down how a relationship is toxic. Very harmful. Harmful to what? Harmful to the mind, to the soul, to the body, to the encouragement of your heart. Unpleasant. You know things that are unpleasant when you're in an environment where you just don't feel comfortable. Well, how about you're in relationships that are not making you feel comfortable? Now, let's look at the word relationship. It says the way in which two or more concept objects or people are connected, or the state of being connected. So you're looking at persons or people that you are connected with and wondering and asking yourself, is this poisonous? You know, the things that we engage with one another, are they things that are uplifting me? Are they things that are inspiring me? Are they things that are giving me hope? Are there things that pushing me to move forward in whatever my goal is? Or is it tearing it down? You know, with venomous words, are they speaking death into the creation that you could have in your life? Are they speaking ill over the things that you want in your life? You have to look at all of these things. That's like a poison. And people don't realize that there is life and death in the tongue. The tongue has so much power that it can either make or break a person. And so asking yourself, am I in a relationship with someone who is talking poisonously to me, which is taunting my mind, my body, my spirit, my emotions? And are they doing this in a way where I am kind of just, that person, and you open yourself up to a place where you accept what they're doing, what they're saying it, how they're making you feel, because you're telling yourself that, oh, this is just how this person behaves. But in all actuality, that's their Mr. Hyde coming out. That's their Mr. Hyde playing that other role, because you can be in a relationship where it seems as though this person is so sweet, so kind, so loving, enduring, and patient with you. But then there's these moments where Mr. Hyde comes out, and you kind of, make an excuse for how that person, Mr. Hyde, is portraying itself to you, to other people. And sometimes it's not even other people, it's just to you. And the reason it's just to you is because for some reason we allow for this thing to happen. And that reminds me of thinking about that behavior as bad temper. Now, here's a statement that I want you to take with you. A bad temper is a burden to all relationships. A bad temper is a burden. What is a burden? A burden is something heavy. A burden is something that's weighing down, pressing down, that's not allowing for you to be able to move smoothly and effortlessly. And so if you're in relationships where you feel burdened, it might just be that you're in a toxic relationship. Now, you know that I love to listen and read scripture, and so it's about that time. We're going to go into the word time. All right, guys. All right. So, yeah, really quick, brief break, and we're back because we're going into the word. And so, I want us to look at this scripture right here. It is in 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 5. And I'm actually reading from the New King James Version. So, just to give you some time, I'm going to take my time so that you can go to 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 5. From the New King James Version. So I hope you have found it now. With all of our smart devices, it's really quick and easy to find a scripture, especially if we're given the reference. If you didn't get to the scripture, I'm going to read it for you now in your hearing, but also go ahead and write that scripture down so that you can go back to it. Whenever I'm reading scripture, I don't just like to read from that particular verse. I like to read the chapter in its entirety. And so that's what I encourage you to do so that you can have more of a clear understanding, a contextual clarity, so that you can really know, thus saith the Lord to you in your heart and in your mind. And so 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 5 reads, love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, and doesn't think evil. So we look at this scripture, we break it down, right? So we're talking about toxic relationships. What about loving relationships? This tells you what a loving relationship is. It tells you what to not expect if it is not a loving relationship. So, what can you not expect? You're going to not expect to have someone who is going to suffer for you, meaning that they're going to go to the ends of the world, going to put their self to the side so that they can make sure that you are okay. And when we're letting Mr. Hyde come out, we're actually tapping into what we want to do. We're not suffering, right? Because we're expressing ourselves and we're saying what we want to say, how we want to say it, when we want to say it, and we necessarily don't care if you don't agree with it, because this is how I feel right now and I'm going to share it. But the suffering comes in when you learn how to keep it in pause. When you learn how to keep it in draft, right? You can have all of these things that are going around in your mind that you want to say. But when you learn how to suffer in relationships, meaning when you learn how to be compassionate, you suffer through what you really want to say, and you learn how to keep those words in draft and not let them vomit all over that person, right? Because then the words that you're now saying to them are putting them in a state of mind where you're what? You're not either supporting them, you're undermining them, you're aggressive with them, you're abusing them with your words. And sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing that because we're so stuck into, oh, you know, I'm me and I can't change. I'm just gonna be me. But being you or that you is not ultimately the best you that you can be. And so we're going to strive to be the best us that we can be and not let that Mr. Hyde come out as it pertains to the relationships that we have with other people in this world. And it says that love is kind. Love is kind. That means that if you're in a relationship, that you're going to be kind to that person. It does not envy. It means that no matter what that person is doing, where they are in their life, you're not going to for 1 second look at them and say, oh, you know, she thinks that she's better than this, or she's better than that, or I feel that I am, you know, more than this. And so when you say those words, it may not be directly to that person, and sometimes it is, but if it's in conversation with someone else, what type of relationship are you now bringing to that other person? You're now bringing forth conversation that is going to allow for them to go into gossiping. And so who wants to be in relationships where people are gossiping? That's toxic all the way around. And it said, love does not parade itself. It is not prideful. You know, you can love someone and be compassionate for them, but you don't have to go out and do all of these miraculous things and say, oh, I did this. You know, how about you're in a relationship and you're talking to your spouse and you're telling them all the things that you've done. Well, I've done this and I've done that, and you haven't done this. That's parading the love or the connection that you have because of some of the things that you might have done. No, love is not all puffed up. Like, why are you all puffy? That's toxic. It's toxic for you to be that way. It's toxic for you to carry that puffed up emotion. Like, I'm not going to be all puffed up. Like, what's the purpose? You know, I want to be calm. I want to be gentle. I want to be loving. And even in the midst of the suffering, I want to be those things. Because if I am those things, I am behaving in a Christ-like way. And I may not be there yet, but I'm growing with each step. And each step I'm learning how to become a better me, where I'm not puffed up and I'm not easy to anger. I'm not easy to wrath, right? And so when we're in those relationships and we realize that we're doing that, that is toxic. That is toxic. And I want you all to know that that is toxic. So we have to learn how to control ourselves. We want to be able to be at peace with all things around us. And I'm not saying, you know, that everything in your life is going to be roses and you're going to see sunshine over all of your days. No, there's going to be some rain. But what you have to do is, number one, have that willpower so that you do not let Mr. Hyde come out, so that you are not being in a toxic relationship or being the person of the toxic relationship. And so another part of this scripture says that you're not rude, right? I think that that's self-explanatory. You're not rude, and you do not seek your own. It's not about you. You know, some arguments are of people wanting to be selfish. You know, they're telling their mate, you know, I'm going to do this because I want to do this. And it doesn't matter what you say, how you say it, when you say it, I'm going to do it. And so that allows for that other person in the relationship to look like, well, wow, you know, you're not respecting anything. And that goes back to one of the things that Dr. Glass said, undermining. So we don't want to do that, and we don't want to portray that personality or that attitude in our relationship. And it's not provoked, right? We're not provoking people. You know, we're not pushing their buttons. We're not like, yeah. Like, you know, I personally know that I've been in some relationships where people have pushed my buttons. But the biggest thing that I learned from being in those relationships and those people pushing my buttons, that I learned how to control my Mr. Hyde, and that I do not let the anger come out. So I immediately pray, God, please take this feeling away from me. God, please take this emotion away from me. So no matter if they're being toxic to me, I don't have to be toxic back to them, right? It's no good for both of you all to have your Mr. Hyde coming out. So you have to learn how to keep your cool, how to keep your calm. And the way that I do that is tuning out. Like, I know that some people say that, oh, you shouldn't tune out. You shouldn't, you should listen. But how about if you are in that situation and the person is provoking you, you have to say, I have to keep my peace. And you can simply say that calmly. You can say that peacefully. And that's my tuning out. You know, right now, I can't be in this conversation, or I can't be in this discussion. I need a moment. I need to regroup. And those are some of the things that we don't often say to our friends or our coworkers or people that we're in relationship with, because everything is so immediate in this world. We live in a microwave society where we want it right now. If there's a problem going on, we want to deal with it right now. If there's an issue, we want it to be resolved right now. And so sometimes it just takes for you having that pausing moment to say, wait a minute, let me think about what I'm going to say before I say it, right? I am going to gather my thoughts and contain my emotions, because you're provoking me to turn or do something that I don't want to do, turn into somebody that I don't want to be, respond the way that I don't want to respond. We have to remember that we are the controller of our response. So if you're the controller of your response, you have to remember, you know, hey, you know, does this person like actually really care for me? They keep pushing my buttons. Are they caring about me to the effect that they're not going to do that? You know, in relationships, it's all about learning one another, right? You grow together. There are going to be some things that this person doesn't like, some things that that person doesn't like. And we have to learn to give and take in order for that relationship to flourish. And so we cannot provoke one another or let that Mr. Hyde come out, so to speak. Lastly, but not least, love does not think evil. It does not think evil, meaning harmful. You know, things that are going to be destructive, right? We're not going to think about those things in relationship. And this is where it gets into the abusive space. It gets into the abusive space, being physical, right? So sometimes Mr. Hyde will come out, and I believe that Mr. Hyde is in a lot of domestic violence relationships, you know, domestic abuse relationships. And because of that, those people don't know how to control themselves. They don't know how to stay calm when they're being provoked, or, you know, when a situation arises that they don't necessarily have the emotional stability or capacity or bandwidth to handle at that time. And so we have to remember that if we're having any non-pure thoughts, any evil thoughts, that we need to check ourselves, you know. as we're in relationships, we should not think about others that way. And if somebody else thinks about that way and they're proving it and they're doing it physically and mentally and all of those things, that's something that we need to question about that relationship. And in these toxic relationships, it's knowing when for that relationship to end, or how do we mend this relationship. Now, a lot of times counseling or going to see a therapist is going to be most likely your number one highway to getting those issues resolved, right? A lot of the times, just talking to one another is not going to be able to really help or sustain, because you need tools, right? If you knew how to do it, you'd be doing it, right? Well, see, some people know things and they still don't do it. But primarily, more than often, if people really want to be in that relationship with someone else, if you really want to be at your job, you find ways to deal and to cope with the situation where it doesn't stress you out, where you're not going home pulling your hair out, where you're not wishing that you didn't have this job. So just trying to, weigh the pros and cons of, should I, continue? Once you realize that this person is a trigger for you. And then secondly, you realize that everything that you kind of do is like toxic. The interaction with one another, how you communicate with one another, just the different things. You realize that it's toxic. And so you have to ask yourself the question, should I be in this relationship? And so some of you out here might have to ask yourself, is this the relationship that I really belong in? Is this the job that I should really work in? Is this the group of individuals that I should really be a part of, the organization? So just asking yourself those questions and really learning about what toxic relationships are. Again, seeking therapy for help. We love the Healing Incubator podcast, but we're a place where you kind of get the questions asked, and then you kind of get to your conclusion, and then you find out that you really need help. And if you need help other than that, there's also coaching. I do healing coaching as well, so you can connect with me and we can chat further about that. We all have to continue to grow in our lives, and that it's not just a one and done. We may have healed in one situation, but over here, in that corner where I've compartmentalized this issue, I think I kind of still need help. So guys, we are wrapping up this podcast for today. I pray that you have taken some information with you, and just realizing, even when people have bad tempers, that is a burden on all relationships. And is this relationship worth being in a burdened state of mind? Should I keep it or should I release it? That person keeps letting Mr. Hyde come out, or I'm the one who keeps letting Mr. Hyde come out. Sometimes if you are Mr. Hyde, you need to ask yourself, wait a minute, do I need to pull apart? Because I need to work on some things before I continue into this relationship. So guys, thank you again for celebrating Forgiveness Friday with me again. And also thank you for tuning into the podcast. I pray that you're sharing it, and I pray that you have received something from this message today. I love you all, and I'll see you next week. Peace.